It's a cool February night in Baton Rouge. 9 young men stand shoulder to shoulder in a dimly lit warehouse. Their hearts are pounding with a mix of excitement and dread. Thud, a gloved fist crashes into a pledge's chest. Another thud, and another. 20-year-old Caleb Wilson gasps for air as he's struck again. Suddenly, Caleb's body seizes. He collapses to the concrete floor. Panicked fraternity members hover over him, but no one calls 911. Instead, a car speeds off into the night, racing toward a hospital. When staff asks what happened, the nervous friends lie. He just collapsed playing basketball at the park, they say. But the bruises on Caleb's chest and the truth left behind in that warehouse tells a far more horrifying story. Tonight, on Cigar A Crime, we delve into the tragic hazing death of Southern University student Caleb Wilson, a case that has shaken the black fraternity world and prompted a harsh look in the mirror. Hello and welcome to Cigar A Crime, the podcast where we blend our passion for premium cigars with deep dives into true crime. I'm Dr. D, your host. For this in-depth episode, we'll take a hard, unflinching look at a story that hits especially close to home for me. As a member of Alpha Phi Alpha Fraternity Incorporated, one of the historically black Divine 9 fraternities, and an HBCU graduate myself, I was heartbroken and disturbed by the events you just heard. We often speak of brotherhood and unity, yet what unfolded on that night in Baton Rouge stands in tragic contradiction. In this episode, we will follow the usual Cigar A Crime template: a cold opening, the intro. That's now, our cigar of the day, a deep dive into the victim's life and the family, a detailed timeline of what happened, a reflective discussion segment, and finally, the outro. By the end, we'll also zoom out to see how this case fits into the broader context of fraternity hazing. From black Greek letter organizations to notorious cases like Sigma Alpha Epsilon, this is going to be a powerful and candid conversation. So settle in before we dive fully into the darkness of this case. Let's take a moment for one of our lighter traditions on this show, our cigar of the day. Today I've chosen the Padron 1964 anniversary series, Maduro, a classic Nicaraguan cigar with rich, dark wrapper. I picked the full-bodied smoke for its depth and complexity, which feels appropriate given the heavy subject that we're about to tackle. As I light it, notes of cocoa espresso and a hint of pepper greet the palate, providing a comforting ritual in contrast to the discomfort of our topic. This draw is smooth, the ash is firm, and each puff offers a warm, robust flavor. Sometimes a good cigar can be grounded companion when discussing difficult truths. So as the velvety smoke swirls around me, let's turn our attention to Caleb Wilson, the young man at the center of this story. And remember that behind every headline is a real person with a life worth celebrating. Caleb Elijah Wilson was more than just a name in a news report. He was a vibrant young man with a promising future. Caleb was 20 years old, a junior at Southern University and A&M College in Baton Rouge, Louisiana. He hailed from Kenner, Louisiana, a suburb of New Orleans, and was studying mechanical engineering. Those who knew him described him as an intelligent, talented, and full of energy. In addition to his demanding studies, Caleb poured his passion into music. He was a proud member of Southern's famed marching band, the Human Jukebox, where he played trumpet. And anybody that's part of the SWAC, part of any HBCU, like I was, know about the Human Jukebox. Bandmates remembered him as a talented trumpet player a dedicated student, and a bright soul whose energy lifted others around him. Caleb's roots ran deep in his community. He grew up in the Pilgrim Baptist Church of Kenner, practically raised in the pews. In fact, his grandfather had been the pastor of that church for 44 years, and Caleb was actually baptized there as a baby. Caleb grew up in this church from a baby, recalled Reverend Mitchell Stevens, who is the current pastor and a close family friend. When Caleb came home from college on weekends, he often brought his trumpet to play during worship services, filling that sanctuary with music. Reverend Stevens described Caleb as a bright light to this church and community. Just an all-around good guy. It's clear he was deeply loved. As I mentioned, Caleb was also part of the Southern University's storied marching band family, which is a tight-knit community in its own right. Band life at an HBCU is much like Greek life. Fosters camaraderie and pride. Caleb wore the band's uniform and his ambition with equal honor. His family, in a statement, said he was a bright and talented young man with a promising future ahead of him. Someone who touched many lives positively. On March 5th, 2025, just days after his death, hundreds of people gathered outside of Southern's campus union for a candlelight vigil. There was sorrow, but also celebration. A second line parade, a New Orleans kind of tradition, danced through campus with mourners holding up pictures of Caleb and honoring the joy he brought in his short life. Later that same evening, another vigil was held at his home church in Kenner, where friends and his family shared tears and fond memories. Hearing these reflections, we get a portrait of a young man who was gifted and loved, a son, a brother, a friend, a scholar, a musician. Caleb Wilson had dreams of becoming an engineer, or maybe one day marching back into that church with a degree in his hand to make his family proud. Tragically, those dreams were cut short in the most brutal manner by the very people he sought brotherhood with. To understand how such a promising life was lost, we have to examine what happened on the night of February 26, 2025. Caleb Wilson lost his life during an alleged hazing ritual as he attempted to join the Beta Sigma chapter of Omega Psi Phi, a historically black fraternity at Southern University. Omega Psi Phi is one of the Divine Nine Greek letter organizations and is known for its proud history. I know plenty members of Omega Psi Phi. But on this night, something went terribly wrong. Let's walk through the timeline of that fateful evening and the early morning hours that followed, piecing together information from police reports and witness accounts. On February 26, 2025, late evening, Caleb and 8 other pledgees, prospective members, were instructed to meet at a private warehouse owned by a flooring company, which was off campus in Baton Rouge. The location itself hints at secrecy, an off-campus warehouse, far from watchful eyes. According to arrest warrant affidavits later reviewed by investigators, once gathered, the pledges were told to change into matching gray sweats for the evening. Inside the warehouse, several initiated members of Omega Psi Phi fraternity were waiting. Among them were 23-year-old Caleb McCrae, 25-year-old Kyle Thurman, and 28-year-old Isaiah Smith. It's a grim coincidence that one of the accused shares Caleb's first name. To avoid this confusion, I'll refer to him as McCrae. Notably, Isaiah Smith was identified as the chapter's Dean of Pledgees, which we call the DP, essentially the member in charge of the intake process. The pledgees, including Caleb, were lined up shoulder to shoulder. Then the hazing began. McCrae, Smith, and Thurman each put on boxing gloves and took turns punching the pledgees who stood defenseless in that line. It was described as a ritual, some kind of test of endurance or loyalty perhaps, but in reality, it was a gauntlet of abuse. One by one, the young men were struck in the chest by the glove fraternity members. Caleb Wilson, slight in build but big in heart, endured 4 blows to his chest delivered by McCrae. With each punch, Caleb must have tried to stand tall to prove his worth to the brothers he hoped to join. But after the 4th hit, the unthinkable happened. Caleb suddenly collapsed, his body racked by a seizure. Witnesses later recounted that he fell to the ground, shaking uncontrollably, a terrifying sight. In that moment, panic set in among everybody that was present. The other pledgees were quickly hurried out of that room into a separate area so they wouldn't see the full extent of that emergency. A few fraternity members rushed to Caleb's side as he lay unresponsive. Here was a critical juncture, a matter of life and death. But instead of these assholes immediately calling 911 for professional medical help, no one called or even attempted to call an ambulance right away. And my question is why? Was it fear of getting in trouble? A misguided hope that Caleb would just wake up? We don't fully know. Baton Rouge Police Chief Thomas Morse will later emphasize this tragic failure, noting that not a single person at the warehouse dialed emergency services when Caleb went down. Sometime after midnight, February 27, 2025, with Caleb still unresponsive, a decision was made. Isaiah Smith's car was pulled around and they carefully lifted Caleb into the vehicle. We can imagine the scene, a group of frantic young men loading their unconscious friend into a car, heart racing, hoping he'll be okay, yet still not calling paramedics. They drove him to Baton Rouge General Medical Center and hurriedly dropped him off at the ER entrance. Hospital surveillance cameras captured a group of males carrying Caleb and then leaving him. Some type of fucking brotherhood. So when hospital staff questioned them about it, these individuals clung to a lie. They claimed Caleb had collapsed while playing basketball at a park. Specifically, sources later revealed they mentioned North Sherwood Park. It's a story that might explain a sudden collapse, perhaps an undetected heart issue, but it didn't match the evidence on Caleb's body. Doctors and nurses sprang into action to try to save Caleb. His clothes had been changed prior to arrival. When he was found at the hospital, he was dressed only in black sweatpants, white socks, no shirt. Perhaps the fraternity members removed his sweat-soaked sweatshirt or any of those items that could associate him with the hazing ritual. In those critical minutes, however, Caleb's fate was sealed. He was pronounced dead by medical personnel there at the hospital soon after arrival. It was 3:15 a.m. when hospital staff, realizing this was not a simple medical episode, They notified the Baton Rouge Police Department that a young man had died under very suspicious circumstances. Once police got involved, the story just started unraveling very fast. The basketball explanation was quickly deemed not accurate. During the initial autopsy, the coroner noted a small bruise on Caleb's chest, and combined with pledgee witness statements, investigators zeroed in on Omega Psi-Phi. A search warrant at the warehouse turned up black boxing gloves, matching what pledgees described. Within days, warrants followed. On March 6, 2025, Caleb McRae, 23 years old, turned himself in, and he was booked on criminal hazing and negligent homicide. Later, that was upgraded to manslaughter, a charge consistent with reckless disregard, not necessarily intent to kill. Soon after, Kyle Thurman was arrested, and Isaiah Smith, he surrendered. Both were charged with felony criminal hazing. Smith was also the dean of pledgees, meaning he had responsibilities to supervise, making the outcome even harder to stomach. Under Louisiana's Max Groover Act, hazing that results in serious injury or death can bring felony penalties of up to 5 years. Southern University began to move very quickly. The Omega Psi-Phi chapter was ordered to cease all activities, and President Dennis Shields announced that an indefinite suspension of all Greek intake and social activity for the rest of the academic year, warning that any student involved could face expulsion. Omega Psi-Phi's international president, Ricky Lewis, he released a statement expressing condolences and pledging cooperation with law enforcement. The fraternity emphasized that the event was unsanctioned and reiterates zero tolerance for hazing. Follow-up reporting said the 3 charged members were expelled from the fraternity. For the autopsy, for months the question was, what exactly killed Caleb? In late September 2025, the coroner's final report ruled the death a homicide caused by commotio cordis, which is a rare, often fatal heart rhythm disruption triggered by a blunt blow to the chest. In plain terms, those punches didn't just hurt, they stopped Caleb's heart. With that finding, Caleb's parents, Corey Wilson Sr. and Urania Brown Wilson, they filed a wrongful death lawsuit against Omega Psi-Phi and the Southern University Board of Supervisors. The suit argues hazing risk was known and pervasive, and that the oversight failures allowed dangerous practices to continue, making Caleb's death not a freak accident, but the foreseeable result of a hazing culture left unchecked. Their message wasn't only about damages, it was about change, replacing hazing and tradition with love, respect, and accountability. And that's where this case stops being just one tragedy and become a mirror. Because what happened to Caleb forces a question to the Black Greek community and the Black community at large. We can't dodge this. How do we condemn brutality in the streets, but excuse it behind closed doors? Now let's step back and examine the broader history of hazing inside the Divine Nine and beyond. Caleb Wilson's death has triggered intense soul searching within the Divine Nine. The 9 historically Black fraternities and sororities that have been cornerstones of Black college life for over a century. These organizations, including my own Alpha Phi Alpha, were founded on principles of scholarship, uplift, brotherhood, and sisterhood under often hostile conditions. It is no exaggeration to say they produced some of the greatest black leaders. Dr. Martin Luther King was an alpha. Rosa Parks, an AKA. That is why hazing-related tragedies within these ranks feel especially painful and perplexing. How did practices that physically and psychologically harm members become entwined with groups they were meant to nurture and empower? Talk to me about that. Hazing is, of course, not unique to black organizations. It is a fraternity sorority problem across the board, and indeed not even limited to Greek life. Athletic teams, marching bands, even workspaces have seen hazing behaviors. But there is a particular irony when it occurs among groups where the very existence was to provide safe harbor and solidarity for black students. How can you beat someone and then call them your brother or sister? How can we, as a black community, protest against police brutality and race violence, yet inflict brutal violence on our own in the name of tradition? These are the questions burning in my mind. Let's talk some facts in history. By the late 1980s, hazing in black fraternities and sororities had become so severe that leadership took an unprecedented step. In 1990, the national leaders of the 8 predominantly black Greek letter organizations banned traditional pledging outright, declaring the old system broken and too often abusive. It was replaced with what's now called the membership intake process, or the MIP, meant to be shorter, more transparent, and free of physical harm. On paper, every Divine Nine organization has zero tolerance for hazing. In reality, culture has proved harder to change. Many chapters simply took pledging underground, secrecy, pride in earning letters, and a generational mindset, I went through it, so you should too, allowed hazing to survive in those shadows. That silence has had a deadly consequence. One of the most haunting cases occurred in 2002 at Cal State involving Alpha Kappa Alpha sorority, the oldest black sorority. During an alleged underground hazing ritual, Christian High, 22 at the time, Kenitha Safir, 24 at the time, were led blindfolded and bound into the Pacific Ocean as part of a so-called trust exercise. A wave swept them under. They never came back. Their families filed a $100 million lawsuit accusing the sorority of maintaining a code of silence and failing to stop dangerous, unsanctioned practices. Criminal charges were never filed. Physical evidence was literally washed away by the ocean. But the message was clear. Secrecy can kill. The words of one of the mothers still haunt this conversation. She said, "I'm not angry. I'm just disappointed. They're hiding behind this code of silence, and they're victims too." Even in grief, she recognized a painful truth. Hazing isn't just cruelty. It's a cycle, passed down, normalized, and protected until someone doesn't survive it. Fast forward to today, and the problem hasn't gone away. In fact, Omega Psi Phi, the fraternity connected to Caleb's case, has faced renewed scrutiny elsewhere. Just 1 week before Caleb's family filed their lawsuit, a federal hazing lawsuit was filed in Mississippi against Omega Psi Phi and the University of Southern Mississippi. In that case, a pledgee named Raphael Joseph alleges that in 2023, he endured an extreme hazing process that left him hospitalized for 11 days, requiring surgery and a blood transfusion. According to the lawsuit, the abuse began with intimidation, threats of sleep deprivation, taking pledgees' money and food, and escalated to beatings with a wooden paddle made from a 2x4. It culminated in a so-called hell night, where Joseph was beaten so severely, he later had to relearn how to walk. The suit also alleges the university knew about earlier hazing injuries, including another pledgee who tore a knee ligament and failed to intervene. Civil rights attorney Bakari Sellers, involved in this case, put it plainly. He said, "This isn't tradition. It isn't brotherhood. It's criminal violence, and it needs to end." And Omega Psi isn't alone. Every Divine Nine organization has confronted hazing scandals and, tragically, deaths. My own fraternity, Alpha Phi Alpha, has faced its share, from fatalities in the 1970s and 1990s that helped lead to the 1990 pledge ban, to more recent injuries. Hazing's reach goes beyond fraternities, as I mentioned. In 2011, Robert Champion died at Florida A&M University after a brutal hazing incident within the famed Marching 100 band, a band that I love to hear and perform. The HBCU community mourned, marched, demanded reform, and yet, here we are again. And I want to be fair here, because hazing is a nationwide epidemic across all kinds of fraternities, not just black ones. By the mid-2010s, Sigma Alpha Epsilon had earned a grim distinction, the deadliest fraternity in America, they have been labeled. According to Bloomberg News, at least 10 men died in incidents like to SAE chapters between 2006 and 2013, more than any other fraternity in the country during that time. 10 young men gone in 7 years. The causes range from alcohol poisoning and drugs to hazing rituals that spiraled out of control. One of the most disturbing cases was George Dedunes, a 19-year-old Cornell University sophomore who died in 2011. During a so-called reverse hazing ritual, fraternity members kidnapped him, tied him up, and forced him to drink alcohol as a punishment for wrong answers to a fraternity trivia. George passed out. Instead of calling for help, they left him bound on a couch. By morning, he was dead. His blood alcohol level was about 0.35, a lethal amount. His mother later filed a $25 million lawsuit, and the case became a national symbol of fraternity brutality. Facing mounting deaths, lawsuits, and public outrage, SAE's national leadership made a historic move in 2014. They eliminated traditional pledging altogether. New members would join immediately. No pledge period, no hazing window. The fraternity admitted outright that hazing causes members to lie and acknowledged the heavy toll of chapter closures caused by misconduct. It was a radical reform, and even then, it divided alumni. Some praised the change as overdue. Others mourned the loss of tradition. And that resistance tells us everything about how deeply hazing is embedded in fraternity culture. So entrenched that even life-saving reforms can feel threatening to those unwilling to let go. From black fraternities and sororities to predominantly white ones like SAE, the pattern is painfully consistent. Over the past 2 decades, dozens of students have died in hazing-related incidents nationwide. Names like Maxwell Groover at LSU in 2017, Timothy Piazza at Penn State that same year, Stone Foltz at Bowling Green in 2021, and many, many more. These tragedies have driven legislative change. In Louisiana, Caleb's home state, lawmakers passed the Max Groover Act in 2018, making severe hazing a felony. Today, nearly every state has some form of anti-hazing law on the books. But laws don't change culture overnight, because hazing at its core isn't just a legal problem. It's a cultural one, a mindset. And nowhere is that contradiction more jarring than within our Black Greek letter organizations, where we rally loudly against violence and injustice in society, yet have struggled to fully eliminate violence within our own spaces. Why do smart, accomplished college students participate in or even defend this behavior? Part of the answer lies in secrecy and the myth of rites of passage. Within the Divine Nine, there's often been a belief that intake is for us, by us, not to be discussed with outsiders or even national leadership. Breaking that silence can mean isolation or exile. As an Alpha brother and activist, Preston Mitchum noted, talking about hazing means exposing secrets, and that fear keeps people quiet. But filmmaker Byron Hurt has called the silence what it truly is. It's betrayal of our values and of the young people being harmed. Some actually still justify hazing as toughness or tradition. We've heard that pressure makes diamonds, or this is how we weed out who really wants it. But scholar Dr. Stacy Patton reminds us these rituals echo a long history of brutality and the dehumanization of Black bodies. What's often mislabeled as bonding is really truly trauma bonding. People laughing later about pain they endured, as if suffering is what creates loyalty. Real bond, it comes from shared purpose, values, and uplift, not shared trauma. If there is any sliver of hope, its tragedies like Caleb's force a reckoning. After his death, Byron Hurt himself and Omega Brother heard from fraternity members saying, "You were right, keep going." It's heartbreaking that it takes loss to spark change, but sometimes that's what finally breaks the silence. And with that context laid bare, I want to move into something more personal, because this isn't just history or headlines for me. It's about what this all means for our fraternities, for the Black community, and for the young people trusting us with their lives. I've been holding my breath through much of this episode, kind of torn between anger and sorrow. Caleb's story, it hits me hard, not only because I see a bright young man whose life was senselessly stolen, but because it forces me to confront the uncomfortable truths within my own cherished fraternity life. Let me be clear. I love my fraternity. I love the bonds. I love the history, the mission of Alpha Phi Alpha. The same is true for my friends in Omega Psi Phi, Kappa Alpha Psi, Delta Sigma Theta, Zeta Phi Beta, and all of the Divine Nine fraternities and sororities. We owe these organizations a lot. They produce mentors, community leaders, philanthropists, and yes, fighters for social justice. That's why it absolutely devastates me to see acts of violence occur under the banner of brotherhood or sisterhood. It's more than tragic. It's a betrayal. How do we reconcile chanting not one more at Black Lives Matter protests, then turning around and making our own members endure brutality behind closed doors. How can we demand respect and protection for black bodies in a society when we don't even protect the black bodies of our younger brothers and sisters in Greek life? It's a gut check for all of us. Hypocrisy is a strong word, but if the shoe fits, we have to wear it and then work to change it. I want to take this somewhere personal now because this isn't just research for me. I pledged in spring 1998. I remember becoming a member of my fraternity back in college, in undergrad. There were moments of real pride, putting on that jacket for the first time, wearing those letters, learning about our founders, who in 1906 risked their safety for our future to carve out space for black excellence when this country offered us none. That history mattered to me. It still does. But there was another side of it too. The whispers, the folklore, the stories about old heads, paddles, endurance, suffering dressed up as loyalty. I experienced isolation. I experienced abuse. And while my chapter's process ultimately stayed within the bounds of respect, and I'm grateful for that, truly I am, I know my story is not the dominant one. Too many brothers don't get dignity. They get bruises, silence, shame, long nights asking themselves, why do the people I want to call my brothers hurt me like this? I remember the moment I had enough. I took enough. I got tired of old heads putting their hands on me, paddling, pinching me to bruises. Tired of being told pain was tradition. Tired of being told suffering was proof. So I took a fucking stand. I refused to go back to the hole. And the consequences came fast. Oh, they called me cat. Some of my own line brothers stopped speaking to me altogether. Some haven't spoken to me since. And you know what? I'm okay with that. Because I didn't turn my back on them. I chose my peace. I refused to let anyone convince me that brotherhood required brutality. I refused to relive the same violence my ancestors were forced to endure, just repackaged with Greek letters and tradition stamped on top. Let me say this plainly. I did not survive centuries of black trauma to volunteer for it. We can't keep saying that's how it was when how it was is killing us. We can't protest against police brutality in the daylight and excuse internal violence at night. We can't chant Black Lives Matter and then treat black bodies as disposable during intake. That contradiction is killing us. Brotherhood is supposed to be refuge. Sisterhood is supposed to be safety, not fear, not silence, not scars you're told to laugh about years later. If choosing dignity made me an outsider, so be it. If protecting my body and my spirit cost me a relationship, so be it. Because real brotherhood doesn't ask you to bleed to belong. And real strength doesn't come from surviving abuse. It comes from ending it. Caleb Wilson never got the chance to choose his peace. And that's why I'm speaking now. Some people say hazing happens everywhere. Why single out black fraternities? You're airing dirty laundry. I'm speaking because this is my community. And yes, I hold every fraternity accountable, black or white. Hazing is a cultural cancer across the board. But within Black Greek life, we carry a unique responsibility. We know what it means to have our bodies devalued by society. We should be the last ones reproducing that violence among ourselves. It's chilling to see echoes of domination, once used by slave masters and enforced through police brutality, reappear in rituals we call tradition. That parallel must be faced and rejected. So how do we fix it? Banning pledging in 1990 was a step, but not a cure. Laws matter, but they are reactive. Real change has to come from inside the culture, a collective decision that says enough, this ends with us. When people glorify how hard their process was, I ask, did surviving trauma make you a better brother or just a traumatized one? Brotherhood and sisterhood should be built on trust, service, and character, not endurance of abuse. Accountability matters. I applaud Southern University for freezing Greek activities and cooperating with law enforcement. I applaud Omega Psi Phi for expelling those charged. That sends a clear message. Violence has no home in brotherhood. Anyone who endangers life through hazing should be removed and held legally responsible. Tradition and peer pressure are never excuses for homicide. To my Divine Nine family, we are better than this. Our founders didn't endure what they did, so a century later, our youngest members would end up in graves or ICUs. They were building family. If our process looks like enemy combat, we've lost the plot. Iron sharpens iron doesn't mean stabbing. It means making each other better without breaking bodies or spirits. I think of Caleb's parents who sent their son to college believing these spaces would enrich his life, not end it. Their grace in grief is extraordinary. We owe them, and Caleb, and all the fallen, an end to this plague. At the heart of brotherhood and sisterhood is love. Hazing is the opposite, rooted in power and control. If I call you my brother, I protect you. If I call you my sister, I lift you up, period. I'm cautiously hopeful. Conversations once whispered are now happening out loud. Young members are questioning old norms. Old members are admitting change is overdue. Culture can change again. So to members and aspirants listening, if you see something, say something and do something. Courage may cost popularity, but it can save a life. And to families, tell your kids they can say no. No organization worth joining will ever require pain to prove belonging. Caleb Wilson's death is senseless, but it doesn't have to be in vain. If his story stops one beating, one paddle, one night of silence, his legacy lives. And I'll end where my heart is. This isn't tradition. It isn't brotherhood. It's criminal violence, and it needs to end. And I want to give you a case update. Before we close, I need to update you because this case is still unfolding. In December of 2025, just last week, I think, prosecutors went back to the grand jury. Reports say Jayden Landrum, who's 24 years old, was indicted as well and later booked into the East Baton Rouge Parish Prison after jail records listed a fugitive booking. Multiple suspects have now been indicted in connection with Caleb Wilson's death, and investigators have suggested the case may not be finished. And I want to say this very clearly. Everyone is presumed innocent in court, but morally, spiritually, culturally, this story is already a warning flare Because whether it ends in convictions or not, Caleb is still gone. You've been listening to a very somber but necessary episode of Cigar A Crime. Today we peel back the polished veneer of Greek life to expose the wounds beneath, and we remembered a young man, Caleb Wilson, who should be with us pursuing his dreams right now. Instead, we have to carry his memory and demand change so that no other family suffers like his. If you found this episode powerful or important, please share it with others. These conversations can literally save lives. I want to thank you, the listeners, for hanging in there through the tough details and for your willingness to confront uncomfortable truths. Change often starts with awareness. On a programming note, our cigar of the day, the Padron 1964 Anniversary Maduro, burns steadily through our discussion, almost a quiet witness to this story. As I tap out its final ash, I'm reminded that even in heavy moments, we seek light and clarity, much like the embers of a cigar glow through darkness. Stay tuned for our next episode where we'll continue to explore intersections of vice and virtue, crime and community. And remember, in everything, hold yourself and your peers to the highest standard of integrity and care. Whether you're in a fraternity, a team, a club, or just a group of friends, take care of each other. Brotherhood and sisterhood are sacred bonds. Let's honor those bonds by keeping them free of harm. And this is Dr. D signing off. Thank you for listening to Cigar A Crime. Stay safe, love one another, and until next time, take care. And always remember, the smoke, it never lies.